Security lights bathed the docking bay in harsh white as transport ships from dozens of worlds discharged their passengers onto Gateway Station, the largest trading hub humanity had ever constructed in the depths of space. David Reed moved through, the crowd with the measured pace of someone who had learned to be cautious in unfamiliar places, his brown leather jacket hanging loose over shoulders that carried more tension than his calm expression revealed. The checkpoint ahead buzzed with activity as Altarian security officers processed the steady stream of travelers, their crystalline bodies refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns across the metal walls. When David's turn came, the tall alien gestured toward the scanner with one of its forearms, speaking in the melodic tones that marked its species. "Place your hand on the surface, traveler, and state your business on Gateway Station." David pressed his palm against the cool metal surface, feeling the familiar tingle of energy as the device probed his biological signature, searching for weapons, diseases, or contraband hidden within his body. The scanner's gentle hum shifted to a harsh screech that cut through the ambient noise of the terminal like a blade through silk, and emergency lights began flashing in patterns that made nearby aliens step back in alarm. "What is this?" the security chief demanded, its voice losing all traces of routine courtesy as it studied the readouts streaming across multiple screens. Data cascaded down the displays in languages David couldn't read, but the expressions on every alien face told him everything he needed to know about what the machines had found beneath his skin. "The scanner detects tissue damage patterns that should not exist," another officer announced, its translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in most languages. David kept his expression neutral as more security personnel gathered around the checkpoint, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones that filled the air with tension. These markings suggest exposure to energy weapons that operate beyond conventional physics. The chief continued, its crystalline form shifting colors from blue to deep red. "The database contains no records of any civilization possessing such technology." A crowd began to form as word spread through the terminal that something unprecedented was happening at the security checkpoint, with merchants and diplomats alike pressing closer to witness whatever anomaly had triggered such a response. "Human," the chief addressed David directly, its four eyes focusing on him with an intensity that made the air seem to shimmer. "Our most advanced medical scanners indicate that your wounds were inflicted by forces that exist outside normal space and time." David's silence only seemed to fuel the growing excitement among the gathered aliens, who whispered among themselves in languages that had evolved on worlds he had never seen. "The energy signatures embedded in your tissue match theoretical models of weapons that could only be wielded by beings of immense power," another officer added, consulting a device that projected holographic displays into the air between them. "Legends speak of entities called architects who shaped reality itself in the early ages of the galaxy," the chief said, its voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "But these are stories told to young ones, not medical facts recorded by precision instruments." The scanner continued its analysis, each new discovery adding to the growing list of impossibilities that seemed to surround this ordinary-looking human who had simply wanted to pass through their checkpoint. The cellular reconstruction patterns indicate exposure to dimensional fractures. A technician reported from a workstation that had been hastily wheeled over to the scene. "Dimensional fractures are theoretical constructs," the chief replied, but its tone suggested that theory was rapidly becoming uncomfortable. Reality, David watched as more security personnel arrived, their various species representing a cross-section of galactic civilization, all united in their confusion over what their instruments were telling them. The wounds appeared to have been partially healed using methods unknown to current medical science. Another voice called out from the growing crowd of analysts. "Partially healed?" the chief asked. "The tissue shows signs of regeneration that follows no known biological process," came the reply. "It is as if the wounds are being maintained in a specific state, neither fully healed nor actively deteriorating." The implications of that statement seemed to ripple through the assembled crowd, like a stone thrown into still water, creating waves of murmured conversation in dozens of different languages. "Human, you will accompany us for further examination," the chief announced, but its tone held more curiosity than authority. "I haven't broken any laws," David said quietly, his first words since approaching the checkpoint. "No," the chief agreed, "but you carry evidence of an encounter that challenges everything we understand about the nature of reality itself." As David was escorted deeper into the station, he could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes following his progress, and he knew that within hours, news of his arrival would spread through diplomatic channels to every major world in known space. Behind him, the scanner continued to emit soft alerts as it processed the lingering energy traces his presence had left on its surface, as if even the touch of his scarred flesh had been enough to contaminate the machine with impossibility. The corridors of Gateway Station stretched ahead like the pathways of a maze, and David realized that his simple plan to transit through neutral space had just become significantly more complicated. Word traveled faster than light through the quantum communication networks that connected civilized worlds, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, ancient powers that had slept for eons began to take notice of the human who bore their mark. The security chief's crystalline form continued to shift colors as it walked beside David, a visible sign of the emotional turmoil that even its advanced psychology was struggling to process. "In all my years of service," it said finally, "I have never encountered anything that so completely contradicts our understanding of what is possible." David's only response was a slight tightening around his eyes, the kind of expression worn by someone who has seen too much and wishes he could forget even a fraction of it. The journey through Gateway Station's security levels would mark the beginning of a crisis that would eventually force every civilization in the galaxy to confront the terrifying possibility that gods might be real, and that at least one human had fought them and lived to carry the scars. Memory struck David like lightning as he sat in the sterile interrogation room, the alien official's questions fading into background noise while his mind transported him back to the bridge of the Perseverance 3 years ago. The deep space exploration vessel had been humanity's pride, equipped with the most advanced sensors and engines that Earth's combined scientific efforts could produce, designed to push the boundaries of known space further than any human had ever traveled. "Captain, we're detecting an artificial structure, approximately 2,000 kilometers off the starboard bow," Lieutenant Carol Watson had reported from her station, her voice carrying the excitement that came with discovering something genuinely unprecedented. The object that appeared on their main screen defied every assumption about ancient architecture, a crystalline construct the size of a moon that seemed to exist in a constant state of flux, its surfaces shifting between geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "It's not showing up on any of our historical databases," Watson continued, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "The energy readings suggest it predates everything we've encountered by millions of years." David remembered the weight of decision that had settled on his shoulders as he stared at the impossible structure, knowing that whatever choice he made would determine the fate of his crew and possibly his entire species. The artifact had called to them, broadcasting signals that bypassed their communication systems entirely and spoke directly to their minds in voices that seemed to come from the spaces between thoughts. "We are the architects," the presence had whispered to every member of the crew simultaneously. "We shaped the fundamental forces of reality when your sun was dust between the stars." First contact protocols had never covered encounters with beings that claimed to have existed since the birth of the galaxy, and David had found himself making decisions without precedent or guidance from Earth. "We have been imprisoned within our own creation for eons beyond counting," the voices continued, "bound by cosmic forces that feared what we might create if left free to work." The crew had been divided from the moment those alien thoughts touched their minds, with some like David recognizing the inherent danger in beings of such power, while others saw an opportunity that could elevate humanity above every other species in known space. "They're offering us knowledge that could revolutionize everything," Chief Engineer Marcus Hayes had argued during the heated debates that consumed the ship. "Technology that could make us the dominant force in the galaxy." But David had seen something in the shifting patterns of the artifact that spoke to a deeper truth about the architects and their intentions, recognition that beings who thought in terms of geological timescales might not have humanity's best interests at heart. "Free us," the voices had pleaded. And we will share the secrets of manipulating space and time, of creating matter from pure thought, of transcending the limitations that bind lesser civilizations to their tiny corners of existence. The schism that developed among the crew had been unlike anything in David's experience, with friends and colleagues choosing sides based on fundamentally different visions of what humanity should become. Watson and 12 others had begun the process of breaking the architect's prison, using their ship's systems to resonate with the alien technology in ways that created holes in the fabric of space itself. David and his supporters had tried to stop them, leading to the first and only mutiny in the history of human deep space exploration. A conflict fought not with traditional weapons, but with tools that could reshape reality at the quantum level. The barriers weaken, the architects had announced, as the ship's hull began to warp under the stress of forces that existed outside normal physics. Soon, we will be free to complete the great work that was interrupted so long ago. The battle that followed had taken place across multiple dimensions, simultaneously, with human beings wielding technologies they barely understood against other humans who had been touched by alien intelligence. David's scars had come from weapons that cut through the boundaries between possible and impossible, leaving wounds that existed in several states of reality at once, never fully healing because they couldn't decide which version of physics to obey. 3 members of the crew had survived when the Perseverance finally tore itself apart, under the strain of conflicting natural laws. Their escape pods ejected into normal space just as the ship and the artifact vanished into a dimensional rift that sealed itself behind them. Darlena Cross had been the ship's xenobiologist. Her brilliant mind focused on understanding alien life forms rather than the cosmic engineering that had doomed their mission. Commander Alex Stone had served as David's tactical officer, his experience with security systems making him invaluable during the chaos that consumed the ship. "We can never speak of what we saw," David had told them as they drifted in their damaged pods, waiting for the rescue ships that would take weeks to reach their position. "The galaxy isn't ready for the knowledge that beings like the architects exist." But secrets had a way of eating at the people who carried them, and Stone's death 2 years later in what officials called a shuttle accident had left David wondering if someone had decided that 3 survivors were too many. Cross had thrown herself into research, using her scientific background to study the energy patterns embedded in their scarred flesh, seeking answers that might help humanity prepare for what could be coming. The interrogation room's walls seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as David's heartbeat as the memories faded and present. Reality reasserted itself, leaving him face to face with alien officials who had no idea what forces they might be dealing with. "Human," the Altarian security chief said, its crystalline form shifting to a deep orange that indicated extreme agitation. "Our analysis suggests that the energy signatures in your tissue are not fading with time but rather growing stronger." David's blood ran cold as he realized what that might mean, and somewhere in the space between dimensions, ancient intelligences that had tasted freedom began to stir from their forced slumber. The artifact might be gone, but the architects had left their mark on everyone who had encountered them, and that mark was beginning to glow with increasing intensity as something vast and terrible approached from beyond the edges of known space. "We need to contact Earth immediately," David said, his voice carrying an urgency that made every alien in the room take notice. "Why?" the chief asked. "Because I think they're coming back," David replied, and in the distance reality itself seemed to shiver with anticipation. Diplomatic channels across the galaxy hummed with encrypted messages as news of David's anomalous medical readings spread from Gateway Station to every major world in known space, creating ripples of concern that reached the highest levels of interstellar government. The Galactic Council's emergency session was called within 6 hours of the initial security breach, bringing together representatives from 12 species in a hastily arranged meeting that would determine how civilized space would respond to this unprecedented situation. Ambassador Ruth Kim arrived at Gateway Station aboard the fastest courier ship Earth could provide. Her diplomatic credentials accompanied by Dr. Lena Cross and a small team of specialists who understood the true nature of what David carried in his scarred flesh. The council chamber buzzed with tension as beings from across the galaxy took their positions around the massive circular table that had been designed to accommodate the wildly different physiologies of advanced civilizations. The human designation David Reed has triggered our most sensitive detection systems, announced Counselor Voss, the Altarian, whose crystalline form now pulsed with deep purple patterns that indicated extreme concern. The energy signatures embedded in his biological matrix suggest exposure to forces that exist outside our current understanding of physics, added Counselor Thex from the Hegemony Worlds, its insectoid features clicking in patterns that convey deep unease. Dr. Cross stepped forward when called upon to testify, her own hidden scars aching with phantom pain as she prepared to reveal secrets that humanity had kept buried for 3 years. The Perseverance incident was classified at the highest levels, she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to disclose to galactic leadership. 3 years ago, our deep space exploration vessel encountered an artificial construct of unknown origin in the void between galaxies, a structure that appeared to predate all known civilizations by millions of years. The chamber fell silent as 12 different species processed the implications of that statement, their various forms of communication stilled by the weight of revelation. Inside this construct, we made contact with entities that called themselves architects, Cross continued, beings of immense power who claimed to have shaped the fundamental forces of reality in the early ages of cosmic history. Counselor Nex of the Crystal Syndicate rose from its position, its geometric form reflecting the chamber's lights in complex patterns. You speak of the old legends, stories that predate written history among the eldest civilizations. These weren't stories, Cross replied firmly. These were living entities imprisoned within their own creation, beings capable of manipulating space and time as easily as we manipulate simple tools. The visual displays around the chamber activated as Cross shared the medical data from her own examinations, showing energy patterns that violated every known law of physics. The wounds carried by Captain Reed and myself were inflicted by weapons that operate beyond conventional reality, she explained. Our tissue shows signs of dimensional fracturing, cellular reconstruction using unknown methodologies, and energy absorption that defies current scientific understanding. Counselor Zeth from the Democratic Union leaned forward, its tentacled form rippling with agitation. If such beings exist, why have our most advanced civilizations never encountered them? Because they were imprisoned, Cross answered, bound by cosmic forces that recognize the danger they represented to existing reality. Were imprisoned? Counselor Voss asked, its crystalline body shifting to a deep red that indicated alarm. Silence that followed that question stretched across the chamber like a physical presence, heavy with implications that none of the assembled representatives wanted to consider. Our mission encountered complications, Cross admitted. Part of our crew attempted to free the architects in exchange for advanced technology. The fools, whispered Counselor Mex from the outer territories, its gaseous form condensing with emotion. Captain Reed and those loyal to him fought to prevent the release, Cross continued. But the conflict resulted in the destruction of our vessel and the apparent escape of at least some architect entities. The chamber erupted in controlled chaos as 12 different species began communicating their concern through methods ranging from harmonic vibrations to electromagnetic pulses. Order, Counselor Voss called, its voice cutting through the cacophony. Dr. Cross, what evidence do you have that these architects have actually escaped their prison? Cross activated another display, showing readings taken from David's scars over the past several months. The energy signatures in our tissue have been growing stronger, as if responding to some external source. The readings from today's incident at Gateway Station confirm this pattern, Counselor Thex added, consulting its own data. The human's biological matrix appears to be resonating with something approaching from beyond our sensor range. Ambassador Kim stood to address the council, her diplomatic training helping her maintain composure, despite the magnitude of the crisis they were discussing. Earth's government is prepared to share all classified information regarding the Perseverance incident, she announced. In exchange, we request the Council's cooperation in developing defensive measures against entities that may view our entire galaxy as nothing more than raw material for their projects. Defensive measures? Counselor Nex asked, its form shifting into patterns. That indicated skepticism. How does one defend against beings that can rewrite the laws of physics? We don't know, Kim admitted, but humanity has a history of finding ways to survive impossible odds. Dr. Cross stepped forward again, her expression grim. There's something else the Council needs to understand about the architects. What? Voss demanded. They don't see other life forms as equals to be conquered or destroyed, Cross explained. They see us as components in a vast artistic project, matter and energy to be reshaped according to their aesthetic vision. Aesthetic vision? Counselor Zeth asked. They want to perfect reality itself, Cross replied, to transform the entire galaxy into a living work of art that reflects their understanding of cosmic beauty. The implications of that statement sent waves of horror through the assembled representatives as they realized that extinction might be preferable to the alternative the architects offered. The energy readings from Captain Reed suggest that contact with the architects created a permanent link between our reality and theirs, Cross continued. He's become a beacon that will guide them back to our universe. Then we must eliminate the beacon. Counselor Mech suggested, its gaseous form swirling with violent patterns. No, Ambassador Kim said firmly. Captain Reed may be our only advantage against beings of such power, the only human who has faced them in combat and survived. To become a threat to every living being in the galaxy, Counselor Nex pointed out. The debate that followed would continue for hours as 12 civilizations struggled to find consensus on how to face a threat that challenged everything they understood about existence itself. But in the depths of space beyond their sensor networks, ancient minds that had slept for eons were awakening to the call of scarred human flesh, and the galaxy's time for preparation was running out faster than any of them could imagine. The council chamber's lights seemed to flicker in rhythm with David's distant heartbeat, as if reality itself was beginning to resonate with forces that had shaped the cosmos when it was young. 3 days after the Galactic Council session, David woke in his secured quarters aboard Gateway Station to find that someone had tried to poison his morning coffee with a neurotoxin designed specifically to target human nervous systems. Dr. Cross examined the contaminated beverage with equipment borrowed from the station's medical facility, her expression growing more troubled as the analysis revealed trace elements that shouldn't exist in nature. This compound was engineered by someone with access to classified biological data about human physiology, she announced, the kind of information that only exists in the deepest security archives of major governments. Ambassador Kim stood at the reinforced window of their meeting room, watching the flow of ships in the docking bays below, while considering the implications of an assassination attempt against a man whose death could trigger galactic chaos. It appears that certain parties have decided David poses too great a risk to be allowed to live, she said grimly, or they want to capture him alive for study, Cross countered. The dosage was carefully calculated to incapacitate rather than kill. David remained silent as they discussed his fate, his attention focused on the growing sensation of pressure behind his eyes that had been building since the council meeting, as if something vast was pushing against the boundaries of his perception. The investigation into the attempt on David's life led them through the labyrinthine corridors of Gateway Station's lower levels, where legitimate businesses mixed freely with enterprises that operated in the gray areas between legal and forbidden. Security footage from the service tunnels shows a figure in maintenance gear accessing the ventilation system that serves your quarters, Agent Sam Torres reported, his Earth intelligence credentials allowing him access to areas that diplomatic immunity couldn't reach. The individual knew exactly which ducts to use and how long it would take for the compound to reach. Your coffee maker, Torres continued. This level of planning suggests inside knowledge of station operations. Their search through the station's databases revealed a pattern of suspicious activities that had begun shortly after news of David's medical anomaly spread through diplomatic channels. Someone has been accessing classified files related to the Perseverance incident, Cross discovered during her analysis of security logs. The attempts are sophisticated enough to avoid automatic detection. Can you trace the source? Kim asked. The intrusions are being routed through multiple proxy servers across different star systems, Cross replied, but the timing suggests coordination between parties on at least 6 different worlds. David's scars had begun to glow with a faint luminescence that was visible even through his clothing, a development that made concealment increasingly difficult as they moved through the station. The energy signatures are strengthening at an exponential rate, Cross observed. Whatever is causing this phenomenon is getting closer or becoming more active. Their investigation took an unexpected turn when they discovered that several major corporations had been quietly purchasing salvage rights to the region of space where the Perseverance had been destroyed. Meridian Industries, Stellar Dynamics, and the Titan Consortium have all filed claims within the past year, Torres reported. They're calling it a materials recovery operation. Materials recovery from what? Kim demanded. According to their filed reports, they believe the area contains exotic matter deposits created by an unknown industrial accident. Torres read from his datapad. The implications of that cover story sent chills through the group as they realized that powerful interests had been planning to exploit architect technology long before David's arrival at Gateway Station had triggered the current crisis. They know exactly what happened out there, Cross concluded. Someone leaked classified information about the Perseverance incident to private interests. Their search for answers led them to a clandestine meeting in the station's hydroponics bay, where a contact that Torres had cultivated among the maintenance staff agreed to share what he had observed. Strange people have been coming through here for months, the alien engineer whispered, its bioluminescent patches flickering with nervous energy. They carry equipment I've never seen before, and they ask questions about dimensional physics that make my head hurt. What kind of equipment? David asked, speaking for the first time in hours. Scanners that detect things that aren't there, the engineer replied. Devices that measure the spaces between molecules and record the songs that empty vacuum sings when no one is listening. The description matched theoretical instruments that would be needed to study architect technology, confirming their suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy they were facing. There's a ship in Bay 17 that arrived 2 days ago, the engineer continued. The crew won't let station personnel perform standard maintenance checks, and their cargo manifest lists materials that don't exist in our databases. David felt his scars pulse with sudden intensity as they approached Bay 17, the sensation growing stronger with each step, until it felt like his flesh was vibrating, in harmony with something hidden behind the sealed cargo doors. Whatever's in there, it's connected to the architects, he said quietly. The ship itself appeared normal enough from the outside, a mid-range cargo hauler of the type used for legitimate interstellar commerce, but the energy readings that Cross detected told a different story. The hull is lined with some kind of shielding material designed to contain exotic particles, she reported, and there are power signatures consistent with technology that operates outside conventional physics. Their covert observation of the ship revealed crew members who moved with the coordination of military personnel despite their civilian credentials, and cargo containers that seemed to bend light around their edges. We need to get inside that ship, David said, his scars now glowing brightly enough to be visible through his jacket. That would be breaking several dozen interstellar laws, Kim pointed out. The alternative might be letting people who don't understand what they're dealing with trigger something that could endanger the entire galaxy, David replied. The infiltration of Bay 17 required all of Torres's intelligence training and Cross's technical expertise, but what they discovered inside the cargo hold made the risks they had taken seem trivial. By comparison, fragments of the original architect construct hung suspended in containment fields, their crystalline surfaces still pulsing with energies that hurt to look at directly. They've been collecting pieces from the debris field, Cross breathed, trying to reverse engineer technology that exists outside our understanding of physics. David's reaction to proximity with actual architect fragments was immediate and dramatic, his scars blazing with light that filled the cargo hold as he fell, to his knees in pain. It's like they're trying to communicate, he gasped. The fragments are responding to whatever the architects embedded in my flesh. The voices that had haunted his dreams for 3 years suddenly became clear, speaking through the resonance between his scars and the alien technology. The little beacon has found our scattered essence, the architect presence whispered directly into his mind. Soon we will have gathered enough fragments to begin the great work anew. Reality trembled across 17 star systems simultaneously as the architects announced their return to the physical universe. their manifestation marked by phenomena that defied every law of physics that civilized species had spent millennia learning to understand on the industrial world of New Geneva. Factory complexes melted like ice cream under a summer sun, before reforming as crystalline gardens that hummed with harmonic frequencies that made observers weep with inexplicable joy. The ocean world of Tidal Prime watched its vast seas transform into fields of liquid light that supported impossible geometries where fish swam through solid matter, and coral reefs grew in dimensions that existed only in theoretical mathematics. David felt every manifestation as a burning sensation that ran along his scars, each reality storm creating new pathways of pain that connected his nervous system to cosmic events happening light years away. The pattern is spreading faster than our communication networks can track, Dr. Cross reported from the Emergency Command Center that had been established aboard Gateway Station. 43 confirmed reality distortions across 12 sectors in the past 6 hours. Ambassador Kim added, her voice tight with the strain of coordinating responses to crises that had no precedent in diplomatic history. The Galactic Council had dissolved into chaos as individual species recalled their fleets to defend homeworlds against transformations that their weapons couldn't fight and their shields couldn't block. The hegemony is reporting that 3 of their colony worlds have stopped responding to communications, came a transmission from Counselor Thex. Long-range sensors show the planets are still there, but they're reflecting light in spectrums that shouldn't exist. David stood before the massive observation windows that lined the command center, watching ships flee Gateway Station as captains chose the uncertainty of deep space over the possibility of being caught in whatever phenomenon might strike next. They're not trying to destroy anything, he said quietly, his words cutting through the urgent conversations that filled the room. What? Cross asked, stepping away from her analysis console. The architects, David continued. They're not conquering or destroying, they're transforming everything according to some vast design that exists in their collective consciousness. The tactical displays showed the pattern of manifestations spreading across the galaxy in configurations that suggested deliberate artistry rather than random destruction. They see the universe as raw material, David explained, his scars pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Stars, planets, entire civilizations are just components in a cosmic sculpture that they're creating. Agent Torres burst into the command center carrying a data pad that contained intelligence reports from across known Space Earth Fleet Command is mobilizing every available vessel. He announced, Admiral Chen is coordinating with allied species to establish defensive perimeters around key systems. Defensive perimeters won't work, David said, turning away from the windows. The architects operate outside the dimensions, where our weapons can reach them. Then what do you suggest we do? Kim demanded. Before David could answer, reality stuttered around Gateway Station like a video feed with a bad connection, and for one terrifying moment, everyone in the command center existed in 17 different versions of the room simultaneously. They're testing the local space-time structure, Cross announced, her instruments detecting energy fluctuations that registered on scales her equipment wasn't designed to measure. Testing it for what? Torres asked. To see how much they can alter before the fundamental forces holding our reality together collapse completely, David replied. The communication board lit up with distress signals from across the galaxy as more worlds reported transformations that turned familiar landscapes into alien artworks that followed no earthly logic. Arcturus Station reports that their artificial gravity has been replaced by localized fields that arrange matter in crystalline patterns. These came one transmission. The Vegan colonies are experiencing time dilation effects that age some areas by centuries, while others remain frozen in temporal loops. Announced another David's connection to the architects had grown stronger with each manifestation, allowing him glimpses of their vast intelligence and the scope of their ambitions for galactic transformation. I can sense their thoughts, he said, pressing his palms against his temples as alien concepts flooded his consciousness. They've been planning this reconstruction for the entire time they were imprisoned. Reconstruction? Cross asked. They want to transform the galaxy into a single vast organism, David explained. Every star system becomes a cell, every planet becomes an organelle, Every living being becomes a component in a cosmic entity that will exist on scales we can barely imagine. The implications of that revelation settled over the command center like a suffocating blanket, as everyone present realized that extinction might be preferable to the alternative the architects offered. There has to be a way to fight them, Torres insisted. Humanity didn't become the dominant species on Earth by accepting defeat. The human military is already adapting, Kim reported, reading from classified communications. Earth's scientists are working around the clock to develop countermeasures based on data from the Perseverance incident. David's scars suddenly blazed with light bright enough to illuminate the entire command center as the architects focused their attention directly on their unwilling beacon. The beacon serves us well. Their voice whispered through dimensions only David could perceive. Soon we will call him home to serve as the interface between old reality and the perfection we create. They want to use me as some kind of translator, David gasped. A bridge between human consciousness and their cosmic intelligence. Cross moved quickly to her medical scanners, documenting the energy patterns that were transforming David's cellular structure in real time. The process has already begun, she announced. Your biological matrix is being restructured to accommodate thought patterns that exist on completely different scales than human cognition. David fought against the alien influence that was seeping through his scars into his nervous system, using techniques of mental discipline he had learned during his military training. I can resist them, he said through gritted teeth, but not indefinitely, and not if they decide to force the connection. The tactical displays updated with new reports of reality storms approaching core systems, including the route to Earth itself. The Sol Defense Fleet is taking position at the edge of the system, Torres announced, but Admiral Chen admits that conventional weapons may be useless against entities that can rewrite physics. There might be another way, David said slowly, an idea forming in his mind that was either brilliant or completely insane. What way? Kim asked. The architects need my connection to understand human consciousness and integrate our species into their design, David explained. But connections work both ways. You want to try to influence them through the same link they're using to control you? Cross asked. Not influence, David corrected. Sabotage from the inside, using the one advantage we have that they don't expect. What advantage? Torres demanded. David smiled grimly as he felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders once again, just as it had 3 years ago aboard the Perseverance. They've never encountered a species that refuses to accept the impossible. The final battle began not in the depths of space, but in the spaces between dimensions where reality became negotiable and the laws of physics bent to accommodate forces that existed beyond mortal comprehension. David stood at the center of Gateway Station's main reactor chamber, his body serving as a conduit for energies that would have vaporized any normal human. His scars blazing with light that illuminated impossible geometries in the surrounding darkness. The dimensional anchors are holding, Dr. Cross announced from her position at the control station, but the strain on local spacetime is approaching critical levels around them. A combined fleet of human and allied vessels maintained formation in what had once been normal space, but was now a region where mathematics became poetry, and geometry sang with voices from beyond the edge of existence. Earth Fleet reporting ready. Came Admiral Chen's transmission through communication systems that had been modified to function in areas where electromagnetic radiation behaved like liquid music. Altarian Defense Force standing by, added Counselor Voss, whose crystalline form had been temporarily adapted to serve as a living relay for signals that traveled through dimensions humans had no names for. The architect's stronghold materialized around them like a fever dream given substance, a structure that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously while somehow fitting into the 3 that normal minds could perceive. They're here, David announced unnecessarily, as every conscious being within a light year could feel the presence of intelligences vast enough to use solar systems as building blocks. Agent Torres coordinated the defense from his position aboard the lead human destroyer, his tactical displays showing formations that looked more like abstract art than military formations. because conventional geometry couldn't represent the way their ships were arranged. All units. Remember that proximity to the architects will cause reality distortions that affect everything from navigation to basic physics. He broadcast to the combined fleet. David felt the alien intelligence pressing against his consciousness like a tide of liquid starlight, carrying with it concepts that would have driven him insane 3 years ago, but now felt almost familiar. The beacon accepts its purpose. The architect's voice resonated through his bones. Soon the transformation of this galaxy will be complete, and all consciousness will be unified in perfect harmony. That's where you're wrong, David replied, his words carrying across dimensions to reach minds that existed on scales beyond human understanding. Wrong? The concept seemed to confuse the architects as if they had never encountered a universe where their absolute knowledge could be challenged. David drew upon every moment of human stubbornness he had ever witnessed, every instance of his species, refusing to accept defeat when logic dictated surrender, every time humanity had chosen to fight impossible odds rather than submit to inevitable fate. "You don't understand what you're trying to absorb," he said, pushing his consciousness outward along the pathways the architects had carved into his nervous system. "We understand all forms of consciousness," they replied, their certainty absolute and unshakable. "Not ours," David countered, and began to feed them experiences that no cosmic intelligence had ever encountered. He showed them the spirit of a species that had crawled out of caves to reach for the stars, that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended their civilization 1,000 times over. He shared memories of humans who had stared into the abyss of space and decided to explore rather than hide, who had faced extinction-level threats and responded by building better spaceships. The architects recoiled as David's human perspective began to contaminate their perfect cosmic consciousness with concepts like stubborn hope and irrational determination. "This chaotic thinking cannot be allowed to spread," and they announced, their voices carrying notes of something that might have been fear. "Too late," David replied, and opened his mind completely to the alien intelligence. What followed was less a battle than a philosophical argument conducted at the speed of thought across dimensions where ideas had physical weight and concepts could reshape matter. The architects tried to impose their vision of perfect order on David's consciousness, while he responded by showing them the beautiful chaos of human creativity and the strength that came from embracing uncertainty. "Your species seeks to transcend limitations through struggle," the architects observed, their tone shifting from confident superiority to something approaching curiosity. "We don't seek to transcend limitations," David corrected. "We use them as springboards to jump higher than we have any right to reach." The cosmic intelligence that had planned to reshape reality itself found itself confronting a form of consciousness that refused to be categorized or controlled. "This is inefficient," they protested. "Perfection requires order, harmony, the elimination of variables that introduce chaos into the cosmic design." "Perfection is boring," David replied, and began to show them what humanity had accomplished precisely because they had never accepted that anything was impossible through the connection between his scars and their vast intelligence. The human fleet received capabilities they had never possessed, weapons that fired concentrated stubbornness at targets that existed in theoretical dimensions. "All ships, engage the architect's construction apparatus," Admiral Chen ordered, and reality exploded into patterns of light that painted impossible colors across the darkness between stars. A battle that followed transcended physical combat, as human determination clashed with cosmic perfection in ways that forced the universe to choose between order and chaos. David felt his body beginning to dissolve under the strain of channeling, forces that existed beyond the boundaries of biological possibility, but he held on to his consciousness through sheer human willpower. "If I let go, they'll complete their transformation of the galaxy," he told Cross through their communication. "Link, if you don't let go, you'll die," she replied. "Then I don't let go," David said simply. The sacrifice required was beyond anything human civilization had ever asked of one individual, but David had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. His scars opened into dimensional doorways that allowed him to step outside normal spacetime, becoming a permanent guardian stationed at the threshold between realities. The human chooses exile to protect his species, the architects observed, their voices carrying what might have been respect. I choose to stand watch, David corrected, because that's what humans do when we love something. The cosmic intelligence that had sought to perfect the galaxy found itself bound by the same barriers that had once imprisoned them, held in check by a single human who refused to abandon. His postdoctor Cross established the David Reed Foundation to study dimensional phenomena and train future guardians, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared when facing forces beyond their understanding. The legend of the human, who had stood against gods and survived, spread throughout known space, changing how other species viewed the small blue world that had produced such stubborn children. In the spaces between dimensions, David Reed maintained his eternal vigil, his scarred flesh serving as both sentinel and seal against forces that could reshape reality itself. And sometimes when young humans looked up at the stars and wondered if they could reach them, they felt a presence that whispered that impossible was just another word for a challenge that hadn't been accepted yet.